All right. Thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution.Radio, Studio B, noon Mountain Time. Today we have a great show. Unfortunately, my co-host, Leah Shaper, and my partner, she has been sick with the flu now for over a week. And my co-host that was going to fill in for her called me this morning and is sick as well. So what is going on, folks? It seems like there are more people sick all over the place than even during COVID. And no one's really talking about it. Isn't that bizarre to you? Anyway, I do digress. We have a great show planned for you today. As usual, we are going to be discussing the topic of cosmic catastrophe. And in this program, we are going to discuss the ever-present danger of asteroid impact. Now, one of the fans of the channel asked me to do a show on Tunguska. So this show will cover that part, Tunguska, because the Airburst events at Chelyabinsk in 2013 and the 1908 Tunguska event in Russia are two of the best documented asteroid impacts of recent times. So why wouldn't we discuss them, especially in a show about the ever-present danger of asteroid impact? So if you guys are ready, we'll get into it. Now, the Chelyabinsk meteor in 2013 injured over 1,000 people. We'll get into the details. But what we do want to discuss first is that objects like this can hit Earth at any time. There was no warning for the Chelyabinsk event. The angle it came in, we had not identified it as a near-Earth object. We didn't even know it existed. And furthermore, it's not a very big object, just about 60 feet across. 60 feet by 60 feet, weighing about 9,000 tons. And most of it didn't even hit the Earth. Almost all of it blew up or burned up here in the atmosphere before doing anything. It was, in fact, a sonic boom and explosion that caused the damage as the super bolide entered our atmosphere, and a piece of this actually did hit the surface. So if you want to see the videos that we're discussing, you should rewatch this tonight on our Rumble channel, Magnetic Reversal News. So go get that. All right. The airburst events at Chelyabinsk and Tunguska in Russia are the best documented asteroid impacts of recent times. Models that assess the potential danger from such events rely on an accurate picture of their aftermath. And in a paper published, they re-examine the most critical eyewitness accounts of the Tunguska airburst, namely those that describe injuries and casualties, and those that paint a picture of what events were responsible. So we will get into those. And in this study, over 700 eyewitness accounts from the Tunguska airburst events show that inside and near the tree fall area, there were 30 people. Many lost consciousness. 3 passed away as a direct consequence of the Tunguska event. Of course, I've got a frog in my throat. Now let's first talk about Chelyabinsk, because this is the most recent. It just happened back 15th of February in 2013. Now, the Chelyabinsk meteorite was a super bolide that entered Earth's atmosphere over the southern Ural regions in Russia. We have a map here. Right here is the southern Urals. It was caused by an approximately 18-meter diameter or 60 feet wide, 9,100-ton near-Earth asteroid that entered the atmosphere at a shallow 18-degree angle with a speed relative to Earth of 69,000 kilometers per hour, or 43,000 miles per hour. The light from the meteor was briefly brighter than the sun, making it a super bolide. It was visible as far as 100 kilometers or 60 miles away, and it was observed in a wide area of the region and in neighboring republics in Russia. Some eyewitnesses reported feeling intense heat from the fireball. Now, the object exploded in a meteor airburst over Chelyabinsk Oblast at a height of 30 kilometers. That's 18 miles, or more than 90,000 feet up in the atmosphere, which would actually be in the stratosphere. The explosion generated a bright flash, producing a hot cloud of dust and gas that penetrated 86,000 feet. And many surviving small fragmentary meteorites, most of the object's energy was absorbed by the atmosphere, creating a large shockwave. The asteroid had a total kinetic energy before atmospheric impact equivalent to the blast yield of 400 to 500 kilotons of TNT. Estimated from infrasound and seismic measurements, this was approximately 30 times as much energy as released by the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. Think about that. The Chelyabinsk meteor, just 60 feet across, contained 30 times as much energy as the atomic bomb detonated on Hiroshima. Absolutely mind-blowing. Now, the object approached Earth undetected before its atmospheric entry, in part because of its radiant source direction. It was close to the sun. And I don't know if you know, but you can't look at anything near the sun because your eyes will burn out. Oh. 1,491 people were injured seriously enough to seek medical treatment. All of the injuries were due to indirect effects rather than the meteor itself, mainly from broken glass, from windows that were blown in when the shockwave arrived. And we have video of that. And you'll also be able to hear it, the explosion, on the radio. Windows that were blown in when the shockwave arrived minutes after the super bolide's flash. Around 7,200 buildings in 6 cities across the region were damaged by the explosion shockwave, and authorities scrambled to help repair the structures in sub-freezing temperatures. This is the largest known natural object to have entered Earth's atmosphere since the 1908 Tunguska event, which destroyed a wide, remote, forested, and very sparsely populated area of Siberia. And we will talk about that at great length in the second half of the show. The Chelyabinsk meteor is also the only meteor confirmed to have resulted in injuries, with no deaths reported. So the earlier predicted and well-publicized close approach of a large asteroid on the same day occurred about 16 hours later. Very different orbits of the two objects showed that they were unrelated to each other, meaning that we can have two objects coming in and hitting us in the same day that are unrelated. That's amazing. The meteor's ground path is well documented as it raced into our atmosphere at 24,000 miles per hour. The last time a similar phenomenon was observed in the Chelyabinsk region was the Tunguska meteor shower in 1949, after which scientists recovered about 20 meteorites weighing more than 440 pounds in total. The Chelyabinsk meteor is thought to be the biggest natural space object to enter Earth's atmosphere since the 1908 Tunguska event, and the only one confirmed to have resulted in many injuries. Although a small number of panic-related injuries occurred during the Great Madrid meteor event 10th of February back in 1896. Absolutely amazing. Now, preliminary estimates released by the Russian Federal Space Agency that indicate that it was an asteroid moving about 30 kilometers per second, 67,000 miles per hour in a low trajectory, according to the Russian Academy of Sciences. The meteor then pushed through the atmosphere at a velocity of 34,000 miles per hour before exploding. Now, this could have been some type of discharge, like static electricity. Video recordings show the radiant of the meteor above and to the left of the sun. Early analysis of CCTV and dashcam videos posted online indicate that the meteor approached from the southeast and exploded 40 kilometers south of central Chelyabinsk above Korkino at a height of 76,000 feet, with fragments continuing in the direction of Lake Chebarkul. On March 1st, 2013, NASA published a detailed synopsis of the event, stating that the peak brightness at 9:20:33 local time, the meteor was 23.3 kilometers high, and at the time was traveling at 42,000 miles per hour, 60 times the speed of sound. Holy macaroni. The United States Space Agency estimates the diameter of the bolide 17 to 20 meters, or 56 to 66 feet, and has revised the math several times from an initial 7,700 tons to reaching a final estimate of 10,000 tons. The Airburst blast wave, when it hit the ground, produced a seismic wave which registered on seismographs at magnitude 4.2. My goodness. The Russian Geographical Society said that the passing of the meteor over Chelyabinsk caused 3 blasts of different energy. The first explosion was the most powerful, and it was preceded by a bright flash, which lasted about 5 seconds. Initial newspaper altitude estimates range from 98 to 230,000 feet, with an explosive equivalent, according to NASA, as we said, 500 kilotons of TNT. Although there is some debate in this yield. According to a paper in 2013, all these 500 kiloton yield estimates for the meteorite airburst uncertain by a factor of 2 because of a lack of calibration data and those high energies and altitudes. Because of this, some studies have suggested the explosion to have been as powerful as 57 megatons, which would mean a more powerful explosion than Tunguska and comparable to the Tsar Bomba. I wonder how this is possible when the Tunguska object was almost 4 times as large as the Chelyabinsk meteor. Now, let's show you some footage from the Chelyabinsk meteor explosion or event and how the media covered it. This is from ABC World News. So there you have it. There was no warning. And that was the largest bolide since the Tunguska event, which we will talk about now. But first, let's talk about what they were saying about space junk. This was not space junk. This was an asteroid. And it was an asteroid that was barreling towards us. And the only way we could have seen it is by looking at the sun, which makes it impossible to see. Plus, it's only 50 foot across. Very few telescopes on Earth could see an object that small ever at all, which is why we started the Near Earth Object group that monitors these. It's also why she was able to be tracking another object of a similar size that missed us. That is the Near Earth Object Close Approach project, and we will get to that towards the end of the show. So let's jump in with Tunguska. See, I like it when I have someone else on here because we can chime back and forth on what we're talking about. So hopefully next week we will have a co-host, and I think Leah, she's turned the corner, so she's get much better. So by next week, I think she'll be in here with us. Now let's dive into the Tunguska event. Now remember, this object is 3 or 4 times larger than Chelyabinsk. So this would have ripped eardrums. The good news, it was sparsely populated. The Tunguska event is a large explosion between 3 and 50 megatons. And we were just reading that the Chelyabinsk was 50 megatons. It occurred near Podkamenya Tunguska River in the Yenskiysk Governorate. Say that 5 times fast. It happened in Russia, in Siberia, on the morning of the 30th of June, 1908. Now, I think that this explosion happened much higher up in the ionosphere, or maybe right at the top of the stratosphere, which is why it's only appearing down at the surface as a small explosion, or maybe just a piece of it was down lower. But I do digress. The explosion occurred over the sparsely populated East Siberian taiga, and it fell an estimated 80 million trees over an area of 830 square miles. Let that sink in. 830 square miles of old growth trees, 80 million of them laid down like matchsticks. Eyewitness accounts suggest up to 3 people may have died in the blast zone. The explosion has been generally attributed to a meteor airburst. The atmospheric explosion of a stony asteroid about 50 to 60 meters, 160 to 200 feet wide. The funny thing is that there are no meteorite fragments from this event. So let that sink in. The asteroid approached from the east-southeast, probably with relatively high speed of about 98,000 kilometers per hour. Though the incident is classified as an impact event, the object is thought to have exploded at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers, which they're saying is 3 to 6 miles, rather than hitting the Earth's surface, leaving no impact crater. The Tunguska event is the largest impact event on Earth in recorded history. Though much larger impacts have occurred in prehistoric times, and we'll get to that, an explosion of this magnitude would be capable of destroying a large metropolitan area. Yeah, I would say 800 square miles of laid down trees, that would destroy a metropolitan area and even the suburbs. The event has been depicted in numerous works of fiction, and the equivalent Torino scale rating for the impactor is 8. So the Torino scale is a method of categorizing impact hazards associated with near-Earth objects. Near-Earth objects with a Torino scale of 1 are discovered several times a year and may last a few weeks until they have a longer observation arc that eliminates them as a possible collider. The only objects on the Torino scale that have ever ranked higher are asteroid 99942 Apophis, which had a rating of 4 for days in 2004, and several other objects. And now we know that Tunguska was an 8. It only goes up to 10, folks. On the 30th of June, 1908, before the implementation of the Soviet calendar in 1918, Evenki natives and Russian settlers in the hills northwest of Lake Baikal observed a bluish light, nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky and leaving a thin trail. Closer to the horizon, there was a flash producing a billowing cloud, followed by a pillar of fire that cast a red light on the landscape. The pillar split in two, then faded, turning to black. About 10 minutes later, there was a sound similar to artillery fire. Eyewitnesses closer to the explosion reported that the source of the sound moved from east to the north of them. The sounds were accompanied by a shockwave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows hundreds of miles away. The explosion registered at seismic stations across Eurasia, and the airwaves from the blast were detected in Germany, Denmark, Croatia, and the UK. As far away as Batavia, Dust, East Indies, and even Washington, D.C. It's estimated that in some places, the resulting shockwave was equivalent to an earthquake measuring 5. So we saw that the Chelyabinsk was registered as a 4.7. So these are very similar in scale of explosion. Over the next few days, night skies in Asia and Europe were aglow. There are contemporaneous reports of brightly lit photographs being successfully taken at midnight without the aid of flashbulbs in Sweden and Scotland. It has been theorized that this sustained glowing effect was due to light passing through high-altitude ice particles that had formed at extremely low temperatures as a result of the explosion. A phenomenon that decades later was reproduced by space shuttles. In the United States, a Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory program at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California observed a months-long decrease in atmospheric transparency consistent with an increase in suspended dust particles. So that's an interesting phenomenon many of you may not have known about. Let's talk about some selected eyewitness reports. Let me just get some water here. Though the region of Siberia in which the explosion occurred was very sparsely populated in 1908, there are accounts of the event from eyewitnesses, and regional newspapers reported the event shortly after it occurred. Pardon me. This is the testimony of S. Semenov, as recorded by Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik's expedition in 1930. At breakfast time, I was sitting by the house at Vanvara Trading Post, about 40 miles south of the explosion, facing north. I suddenly saw that direction to the north over Ankul Tunguska Road. The sky split in two, and a fire appeared high and wide over the forest, as Semenov showed about 50 degrees up. The split in the sky grew larger, and the entire northern side was covered in fire. At that moment, I became so hot that I couldn't bear it, as if my shirt was on fire. From the northern side, where the fire was, came strong heat. I wanted to tear off my shirt and throw it down, but then the sky shut closed and a strong thump sounded, and I was thrown a few meters. I lost my senses for a moment, but then my wife ran out and led me to the house. After that, such noise came as if rocks were falling or cannons were firing. The earth shook. And when I was on the ground, I pressed my head down, fearing rocks would smash it. When the sky opened up, hot wind raced between the houses, like from cannons, which left traces in the ground like pathways, damaging some crops. Later, we saw that many windows were shattered, and in the barn, a part of the iron lock snapped. This is 40 miles away. This is another testimony of Chuchan of the Sangagir tribe, recorded in 1926. We had a hut by the river with my brother Chikaran. We were sleeping. Suddenly, we both woke up at the same time. Somebody shoved us. We heard whistling and felt strong wind. Chikaran said, "Can you hear all those birds flying overhead?" We were both in the hut. Couldn't see what was going on outside. Suddenly, I got shoved again. This time so hard I fell to the fire. I got scared. Chikaran got scared too. We started crying out for father, mother, brother, but no one answered. There was noise beyond the hut. We could hear trees falling down. Chikaran and I got out of our sleeping bags and wanted to run out, but the thunder struck. This was the first thunder. The earth began to move and rock. The wind hit our hut and knocked it over. My body was pushed down by sticks, but my head was in the clear. Then I saw a wonder. Trees were falling. The branches were on fire. It became mighty bright. How can I say this? As if there was a second sun. My eyes were hurting. I even closed them. It was like what the Russians call lightning. And immediately there was a loud thunderclap. This was the second thunder. The morning was sunny. There were no clouds or sun was shining brightly as usual, and suddenly there came a second one. Chikaran and I had some difficulty getting out from under the remains of our hut. Then we saw that above, but in a different place, there was another flash, and a loud thunder came. This was the third thunder strike. Wind came again, knocked us off of our feet, struck the fallen trees. We looked at the fallen trees, watched the treetops get snapped off, watched the fires. Suddenly, Chikaran yelled, "Look up," and pointed with his hand. I looked there and saw another flash, and it made another thunder. But the noise was less than before. This was the fourth strike, like normal thunder. Now I remember well, there was also one more thunder strike, but it was small and somewhere far away where the sun goes to sleep. We'll read another account from Sibir newspaper from the 2nd of July, 1908. On the morning of the 17th of June, around 9 a.m., we observed an unusual natural occurrence in the North Karadinsky village. The peasants saw to the northwest, rather high on the horizon, some strange, bright, and impossible to look at bluish-white heavenly body, which for 10 minutes moved downwards. The body appeared as a pipe. The sky was cloudless. Only a small dark cloud was observed in the general direction of the bright body. It was hot and dry. As the body neared the ground, the bright body seemed to smudge and then turn into a giant billow of black smoke. And then a loud knocking, not thunder, was heard, as if large stones were falling or artillery was fired. All the buildings shook. At the same time, the cloud began emitting flames of uncertain shapes. All the villagers were stricken with panic and took to the streets. Women cried, thinking it was the end of the world. The author of these lines was, in meantime, in the forest about 6.4 kilometers north and heard the northeast some kind of artillery barrage that repeated at intervals of 15 minutes at least 10 times. In Chelyabinsk, in a few buildings, in the walls facing northeast, window glass shook. So that is very interesting. These accounts make it clear that this was an object that broke up and exploded in multiple phases. And the most significant of the explosions might be the Tunguska event. But what a day to be alive. Since the 1908 event, an estimated 1,000 scholarly papers, mostly in Russian, have been published about it. Owing to the site's remoteness and limited instrumentation available at the time of the event, modern scientific interpretations of its cause and magnitude have relied chiefly on damage assessments and geological studies conducted many years after the event. So one of the first expeditions was in 1927, and it was done by the Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik. He led a team to the Tunguska River Basin to conduct a survey for the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Though they never visited the central blast area, the many local accounts of the event led Kukel to believe that a giant meteorite impact had caused the event. Upon returning, he persuaded the Soviet government to fund an expedition to the suspected impact zone based on the prospect of salvaging meteoric iron, which, like we said, they didn't find any. Kulik led a scientific expedition to the Tunguska site in 1927. He hired local Evenki hunter guides to guide his team to the center of the blast area, where they expected to find an impact crater. To their surprise, there was no crater at ground zero. Instead, they found a zone roughly 5 miles across where the trees were scorched and devoid of branches, but still standing upright. Trees further from the center had been partly scorched and knocked down away from the center, creating a large radial pattern of downed trees. In the 1960s, it was established that the zone of leveled forest occupied an area of 2,150 square kilometers, or more than 830 square miles. Its shape resembled a gigantic spread eagle butterfly with a wingspan of 43 miles and a body length of 34 miles. Upon closer examination, Kulik found holes that he erroneously concluded were meteorite holes. He did not have the means at the time to excavate the holes. During the next 10 years, there were 3 more expeditions to the blast site. Kulik found several dozen little pothole bogs, each 10 to 50 meters in diameter, that he thought might be meteoric craters. But after a laborious exercise in draining one of these bogs, he found an old tree stump on the bottom, ruling out the possibility it was a meteoric crater. In 1938, Kulik arranged for aerial photography survey of the area, covering the central part of the leveled forest. The original negatives of these aerial photographs So they sent expeditions to the area in the 50s and 60s, and found microscopic silicate and magnetite spheres in the sifting of the soil. Similar spheres were predicted to exist in the felled trees, although they could not be detected by contemporary means. Later expeditions did identify such spheres in the resin of the trees. Chemical analysis showed the spheres contain high proportions of nickel relative to iron, which is also found in meteorites, leading to the conclusion they were of extraterrestrial origin. The concentration of the spheres in different regions of the soil was also found to be consistent with the expected distribution of debris from a meteor airburst. Later studies of the spheres found unusual ratios of numerous other metals relative to the surrounding environment, which was taken as further evidence of extraterrestrial origin. Chemical analysis of the peat bogs from the area revealed numerous anomalies consistent with impact events. The isotopic signature of carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen at the layer of the bogs in 1908 were found to be inconsistent with the isotopic ratios measured in adjacent layers. So basically, they're concluding what occurred. An airburst by an asteroid that was 4 to 6 miles above the Earth's surface. And because it was not that high up, there was a large area where the blast went straight down to the ground, and that is that 5-mile area where the trees remain vertical. And we all have seen the famous pictures of the trees laying on their side. This is outside of that vertical area. This is where the Tunguska event occurred. Some tree ring data there. And now we have some comparisons of meteoroids. The Barrington Crater meteoroid, the Tunguska meteoroid, the Chelyabinsk, and even the Sulawesi meteoroid. The largest known meteorite, the remnants of these meteors, is the Hoba meteorite, 2.7 meters by 2.7 meters. That's a pretty big meteorite. So we do have some other eyewitness accounts. In this article, firsthand eyewitness accounts may shed new light on the Tunguska event. We talked about strange glowing clouds, colorful sunsets, and a weak luminescence in the night. These events were reported as far as Europe. Likely many thousands of people with a radius of about 900 miles observed the Tunguska event. But due to the remoteness of the area, eyewitness testimonies were collected only more than half a century after the event, and most were secondhand oral accounts. There's more pictures of the trees. To this day, the accepted theory explaining the Tunguska event remains a cosmic body entering Earth's atmosphere with a substantial mid-air explosion and an airburst flattening more than 80 million trees. The idea is supported by reports describing a fireball descending on the taiga, the presence of impact-related materials like nanodiamonds, metallic and silicate spherules in sediments, the map distribution and direction of the flattened trees pointing away from a single explosion site, and a temporal link between Tunguska and the Taurid swarm. You heard it. The nature of this cosmic body remains unclear. A chemical analysis of the metallic and silicate spherules is not possible, as elements from the magmatic rocks forming the bed of stony Tunguska contaminate the samples. Luca Gasparini and his research team of University of Bologna proposed that the small lake Chaco may have formed by the impact of a fragment of the Tunguska meteorite. Lake Chaco is unusually deep for a region characterized otherwise by shallow ponds formed by melting soil. There is also no record of the lake existing before 1908. So a lot is known and a lot is unknown. But what we do know is these are not unique. There are many peer-reviewed papers of strewn fields where it appears there were huge airbursts. The Hopewell culture in North America might, in fact, have been destroyed by cometary airbursts or asteroid airbursts. Remember, comets are the same thing, just one is electrified and discharging the comet. But many of these asteroids, when they come into our atmosphere, discharge themselves, like Chelyabinsk and Tunguska. Damn. We did go over this paper on Magnetic Reversal News, widespread glasses generated by cometary fireballs during the late Pleistocene in the Atacama Desert. And this may correspond to the impactors that came in 12,800 years ago, causing the Younger Dryas event and the mass extinction of the Pleistocene megafauna. And there were multiple objects for that event. But take a look at this. Small objects frequently collide with Earth. There's an inverse relationship between the size of the object and the frequency of such events. And then they go on to talk about lunar cratering. I don't buy any of that. But this map here shows bolide events from 1994 to 2013. Asteroids that have disintegrated in Earth's atmosphere and the amount of energy released. So bolides, they come into our atmosphere all the time. Take a look at this. This is just 20 years. And there's over 550 bolides that have entered our atmosphere and exploded or burned up. This is significant because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. When will the next one reach the ground? When will the next one explode over our heads, and where will it do it? Look at some of these bolides, where they were. There's a bunch of them here by New York City, by major cities, in Greece, or even in Europe. Where will it hit? Some of the biggest bolides are over here in Russia. Wonder why. Two big ones here. One in Africa. So let's talk about near-Earth objects and the threat to humanity. The following table shows close approaches to Earth by near-Earth objects. And these are only the ones we can see. And as you can see, just in 2025, in February, we discovered about 30 objects. And many people know about asteroid 2024 YR4. I think that's what it's called. Which hit the headlines in the last week or so. Because we had over a 3% chance of this object hitting us. Again, I believe it is the size of the Chelyabinsk. But that probability has since decreased drastically to almost zero. We're down to 0.23%, which is good news for us. But every month, dozens of new near-Earth objects are located. Every month. And they say the nominal distance, the diameter. Let's look at a big one of these. 88-meter object. Oh, boy. So what's interesting on this is that you can find the orbit of the object. Pretty interesting. And the trajectory and the position. So this object is far away from the Earth and the Moon, but a near-Earth object nonetheless. So stony asteroids with a diameter of 13 feet enter at Earth's atmosphere about once a year. Asteroids with a diameter of 7 meters enter the atmosphere about every 5 years, with as much kinetic energy as the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, 16 kilotons. Ordinarily, they explode in the upper atmosphere, and most or all of the solids are vaporized. However, asteroids with a diameter of over 20 meters, which is around 66 feet, like Chelyabinsk, and which strike Earth approximately twice a century, produce powerful airbursts that are a danger to humanity. And we just showed you 2 examples. The 2013 Chelyabinsk meteor was estimated to be about 66 feet in diameter with an airburst of 500 kilotons, an explosion 30 times the Hiroshima bomb impact. And the kicker is, any larger of an object, it may hit the Earth and create a crater as well as an earthquake. And if you get big enough objects coming into Earth and hitting the surface, you may be able to trigger large earthquakes or even volcanic eruptions, because a large impact would literally ring the Earth, similar to the Tonga explosion. The effects of impact events on the biosphere has been the subject of scientific debate. Several theories of impact-related mass extinctions have been in the past 500 million years. There have been 5 generally accepted major mass extinctions that on average extinguish half of all species on Earth. One of the largest mass extinctions to have affected life on Earth was the Permian Triassic, which ended the Permian period 250 million years ago and killed off 90% of all species. Life on Earth took 30 million years to recover. The cause of the Permian Triassic extinction is still a matter of debate. The age and origin of proposed impact craters, i.e., the Bedo high structure, hypothesized to be associated with it, are still controversial. But guess what's associated with that mass extinction? Massive volcanic eruptions that lasted for millennia. And then we've got the last such mass extinction that led to the demise of non-avian dinosaurs and coincided with a large meteorite impact, the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, or the KT boundary, which happened 66 million years ago. Now, we know the Chicxulub crater was responsible for that mass extinction, and that crater is gigantic. And did you think the dinosaurs had any warning? I doubt it. Just like the people in the Russian Taiga had no warning, as they watched in awe a celestial phenomenon not observed ever before by man at that time, the Tunguska event. What if the next bolide comes in is 100 feet at a shallow angle? coming from the direction of the sun, and it hits a major metropolitan area or explodes above it, above Manhattan. What happens then? Well, there will be no warning. There is very little you can do. But based on everything we've seen here, remember, stay away from the windows. There will be an explosion and an airburst. If you see a bolide and you can see it and it's bright as the sun, run and hide and don't look at it. Because there will be a shock wave when it explodes. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. There's really nothing humans can do about it. The probability of you being involved in this is almost zero. It's like winning the lottery. And it will happen again. And that is a boom. If you want one of these shirts, hit the button right there. You're watching on Rumble. Just go into the shop, get your very own Boom to Knowledge shirt. Be safe. We love you.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.